Well, it's not just unexpected. It's more of a miracle than anything else, if you really think about it. And no, I'm not talking about Mary's pregnancy. What always struck me as the most surprising part of our reading today isn't so much Immaculate Conception as it is Mary's reaction to it. I suppose that's the reason the church has given it a special name. You've heard it before. We call it the Magnificat, a joyous song that bursts forth from Mary upon her hearing of this news. Although I worry over time we've romanticized it. After all, from where we sit, some 2,000 years removed, we might be tempted to think, well, of course she's singing a song of joy. She's going to give birth to Jesus. And yet I wonder if we were able to strip away all the sentimentality of this season just for a moment and imagine ourselves in her shoes. If we would really have had the same kind of response. Because if I'm honest, I don't think I would have. I mean, a teenage girl in the first century, unmarried, a virgin, and told by an angel that you will give birth to the Savior of the world. While I'd like to believe I might sing, my soul magnifies the Lord and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior, my hunches, I'd be more likely to yell, what have you done to me, God? Or even more, say nothing at all. Silence is, after all, the natural response in the face of the unspeakable. At least that is initially. The JFK assassination, the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, 9/11. My guess is you found yourself speechless, and understandably so. Which is the reason it caught me off guard the first time I experienced it. And if you've ever seen a traditional New Orleans funeral, you know what I mean. I can remember standing in the French Quarter with Marion when I saw the processional make its way by on a side street. All you heard was footsteps and a brass band playing very solemnly, free as a bird, as they followed behind the casket. No improvisation, no frills, nothing but sadness blown low, blue, and quiet to the beat of a muted snare drum. Quite frankly, it was exactly what I expected from funeral processional. But then a couple of hours later, instead of seeing them this time, I heard them coming from a distance. The snare drummer had removed his mute, and the funeral procession was headed back to town with the raucous strains of Didn't He Ramble and When the Saints Go Marching In. Black umbrellas had been replaced by brightly festooned ones. People who were once marching solemnly were now dancing in the street. And it was as if everyone in the city was waiting for them. The final words had been spoken, the body had been placed in the vault, and now the celebration could begin. Death had been overcome by new life. Now the only thing to do was to dance and to sing and to celebrate. And that was the unexpected part. Joy in the face of sorrow. Dancing in the face of death. Song in the face of silence. Come to think of it, I suppose it should not have been a surprise. I mean, for people of faith, it is consistent with our story. Take Luke's gospel, for instance, just on its own. Not only does Mary sing this song that we hear this morning, but then Zacharias sings when his son John is born and his tongue is finally loosened. The angels sing of peace and goodwill when they share the good news of great joy with the shepherds, and Simeon sings his song of farewell once he's seen God's promise to Israel kept in the Christ child. And it's not just Luke, or even the New Testament for that matter. Mary's song is often compared to Hannah's, who sings a very similar song after becoming pregnant in the book of Samuel. Miriam sings a song too after the Red Sea closes in around the Egyptians who are in pursuit of the Israelites. Even Moses, perhaps the most unexpected of vocalists, sings a song to the Israelites just before his death, that God will be faithful to them even after he is gone. You see, there's just something about song that can give voice to the different kind of joy we experience as people of faith. After all, this isn't any kind of joy. No, it comes from a deeper place. From having hope in the midst of hopelessness, and faith in the midst of doubt, and praise in the midst of despair. That's the reason Malak Chandali started the nonprofit Pianos for Peace anyway. The organization is aimed at achieving peace through art and education and most importantly, music. And they do this in several ways. One of which is taking pianos that people donate and putting them in the most unexpected of places. In fact, they're around parts of Atlanta right now, and I suspect some of you have seen them. A park, for instance, or in front of a homeless shelter, or outside a busy office building. Chandali says, we do this because we've discovered that for most people, pianos are a symbol of joy. Music unites all of us. It's a universal language. And so when you see a piano in an unexpected place, it's likely to bring you unexpected joy and simultaneously be a reminder that we're more alike than we are different. Isn't that the song we hear this morning? It's unexpected for lots of reasons, not the least of which is that it's countercultural. Almost resistant, if you will. It's in the same vein of Paul's words who says, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you. Sometimes the only way for light to come into the darkness is through the unexpected joy of song. In fact, I was reading an Advent candle lighting liturgy that a colleague wrote, which I wish I had read before writing our liturgy for this week. Rather than saying we light this candle of joy for or because or during, instead it reads, we light this candle of joy against. Against greed, against cynicism, against violence, against death. The truth is, the light of Christ in all its form, hope, joy, peace, and love is a veritable protest to the darkness that gathers all around us. And if reading or watching Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas is one of your traditions during this time of year, then you're reminded of this truth. We all know the story. The bitter, grouchy, cave-dwelling creature with a heart 2 sizes too small lives on snowy Mount Crumpet, a steep, high mountain just north of Whoville, home of the merry and warm-hearted Whos. From his perch high atop, the Grinch can hear the noisy Christmas festivities that take place in Whoville, which only annoy him, and so he decides to stop Christmas altogether. He disguises himself as Santa Claus and proceeds to steal all the Who's Christmas presents and Christmas trees and logs for their fires. The Grinch then takes his sleigh up to Mount Crumpet and prepares to dump all the presents into the abyss. As morning breaks, he expects to hear the Who's bitter and sorrowful cries, but is confused to hear them instead singing a joyous Christmas song. He puzzles for a moment until it dawns on him that perhaps Christmas is more than presents and feasting. Maybe Christmas, he says, means a little bit more. I don't know for sure, but my guess is Dr. Seuss knew the Magnificat all too well. While the Grinch may be a fictional character, the story is a reflection of the story of the season that gets lived out again and again and again and again. Like when slaves sang spirituals praising God and protested the masters who locked them out of worship. And civil rights leaders sang, "We shall overcome" in the streets when so many in society didn't give them a chance to advance their cause of justice alone, let alone triumph. And when protesters in Leipzig in 1989 gathered at the Berlin Wall on Monday nights for more than 2 months to sing by candlelight songs of hope and justice leading to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Later, when someone asked one of the officers of the East German secret police, "Why didn't you crush those protests like you had so many others?" the officer replied, "We had no contingency plan for song." You see, that's the thing about the joy of people of faith. It has the power to transform darkness into light, even death into new life. Or at least that was my experience several years ago now. I was serving in Kentucky at the time when I got a phone call from a close colleague one morning that overnight his church, First Christian Church of Owensboro, had been struck by lightning, caught on fire, and burned to the ground. There was going to be a prayer vigil that night at a sister church in their community, and so I made the drive over to support some fellow grief-stricken friends. As I walked into the building, I expected to hear quiet tears and whispers, maybe even silent prayer. But instead, I heard reverberating down the hallway the sound of the organ playing and voices praising God, singing songs like "Great is thy faithfulness" and "How great thou art." Here was a congregation that had just lost their building, which was over 150 years old, and they were praising God for God's faithfulness to them. Sometimes when we can't say anything else, only song can give voice to our story. And I suspect you know what I mean. Like when you sat in worship for the first time after your divorce, and you couldn't read the liturgy or pray the prayers or even listen to the sermon, but you felt God's love wash over you in the hymns that were sung. Or when you sat at your father's funeral, and nothing would come but tears. But as his favorite hymn played while you recessed out, you experienced God's presence with you unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Or when tragedy struck in your community, and you didn't know what to do or to say, so you simply showed up at that benefit concert to help provide relief to the victims, and you found yourself experiencing joy with the thousands of others gathered there to support your neighbors. It's a strange thing, this joy that comes from the divine. It has the power to transform even the most bleak of circumstances. And that's what Mary sings, isn't it? He's scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He's brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He's filled the hungry with good things, sent the rich away empty. This is no mainstream status quo ho-hum message. No, this is the song of our faith. We are not merely John 3:16 people. We are a Magnificat people. A people who laugh in the face of death, who give thanks in the face of despair, who sing in the face of silence. Because we know, as the psalmist writes, weeping may stay the night, but joy comes in the morning. We are a people of unexpected joy to the world. And sometimes that joy even comes unexpected to us. Which I was reminded of just this last week. I was sitting at the table with my daughter, Clara, and I was asking her what she wanted for Christmas. I said to her, "Now, Clara, I don't want to hear what you want because your brother wants it or because your friends want it or what you think your mommy and I want for you. I want to know, what do you really want for Christmas?" And she looked at me and she said, "But Daddy, I don't need anything." She spoke those words, believe it or not. I heard them clear as day. But just beneath them, I could have sworn I heard the faintest of sounds. I can't be sure. But if I were to guess, it was the sound of music.